added some new members to the ATAC and some alternate members. And we're going to just start, since they're sitting on this end of the table, we're going to start with their introductions. Then for your benefit, we'll introduce ourselves. And then for the benefit of everyone, we'll have the audience introduce themselves as well. And what I would ask is, you know, who are you? What brings you to the ATAC? What your basic interests are? You don't need to give us a long, drawn-out description of things just to start the ball rolling. And we actually have ATAC comments towards the end of the meeting, so we could delve into things in more detail as well. So let's see. Let's go ahead. And I guess it's JT.
Yeah. Hi everyone. My name's John Teicher. Everybody calls me JT. I bike and run to work every day, so I thought I'd be a good fit for this committee. Here I am.
I'm Nick Parton. I'm kind of in the same boat. I moved to Colorado 6 years ago, and the main draw to me to stay was the triathlon community and running and biking. So the active community of Colorado kept me here, and that's why I was interested in growing it and making sure that all the resources are there.
Great.
Hi, I'm Pam Welch. Similar story. Moved here for cycling and everything from commuting by bike to being a triathlete also.
And we've got one additional new member, Zach Kroger.
He was unable to attend today.
Introduce himself at the next meeting. Why don't you introduce yourself?
I'm Stephanie Search. I'm an ATAC board member for the last 3 years, and I work full-time at Criterion Bicycles, and what brought me to the ATAC was just interested mostly in the health and wellness of our community and enhancing that through active transportation infrastructure.
And my name is Horst Richardson, and I'm actually the liaison person from the CTAC to this distinguished committee. And I'm retired from Colorado College. I don't know what criteria that is, but you know, liberal arts, retired.
I'm Mark Hopewell. I've been on ATAC for a while. Similar reasons for you guys, not specifically because of that, but I have a real interest in health, wellness issues, and trying to get us to have a place that's made for people that accommodates cars rather than a place for cars that can sometimes accommodate people. And I'm really glad you guys.
I'm Jim Ransom, chair of this committee. I was also previously chair of the Bicycle Advisory Committee. I'm an architect by trade. I've been heavily involved in planning advocacy, and this is an extension of that. I'm a native of Colorado Springs, and I've ridden a bike since before I can remember, all through town, so I share a lot of common interests there.
Hi, Aubrey Day. Professionally, I'm a healthy environment planner with El Paso County Public Health, working on breaking down environmental and physical barriers to optimal health, which in this case in Colorado Springs is often transportation. I'm also a native of Colorado Springs. Jim's got a few years on me.
Just bring that up again.
And walk and bike for pleasure and transportation. Not as much as I used to. I did a bit of a car lifestyle for a little bit, but had a baby and that went out the window. So, welcome you guys. And I'm Kate Brady. I'm the staff liaison. Can you all hear when they speak up here? Is the sorta? So just be mindful when when you're making comments that we want folks in the audience to hear as well. Would you care to tell them who you are, Mr. Roberts?
I'm Tim Roberts, and I'm here to turn off the lights.
Lighting.
Lighting and
I work with traffic engineering, assisting where I can.
I'm Troy Russ. I'm a transportation committee planning consultant out of Denver.
Carlos?
My name is Carlos Perez. I've actually lived here in Colorado Springs for 23 years. I'm actually helping out and volunteering with Bike Colorado Springs, and also I'm a runner as well, so enjoy it. So. here to help.
Alan Beauchamp. I'm with the Trails and Open Space Coalition, Bike Colorado Springs, and I'm also the engagement chair for Bike Colorado Springs.
I'm Kevin Coford. I work for King Horde with Troy.
I'm Jackie West. I'm a board member from the organization of Westside Neighbors.
I'm Susan Davies, Executive Director of the Trails and Open Space Coalition, and Bike Colorado Springs is an initiative of the Trails and Open Space Coalition.
I'm Gary Nesbitt. I work downtown. I'm a corporate risk manager. I bike to work and bike recreational, and I want to do it safely.
I'm Angie Martell. I'm currently an intern with Kate Brady and Tim. And yeah, I'm a native of Colorado, but not Colorado Springs. I like biking and running and all that stuff as well.
My name is Rebecca Marshall, and I'm a citizen of Colorado Springs.
Jerry White. I live on Weber Street, volunteer with Bike Colorado Springs.
So that completes the first item on the agenda. The next item is citizens' comments for any issues that are not already on the agenda, and I presume everybody's had a chance to locate the agenda. So are there any citizens' comments? None now. I always
get singled out.
I always look to you.
Oh, I would, one thing. I would like a kind of a shout out to our Parks Department. We have implemented phase 1, I guess you'd call it, of a legacy loop signage system. And it was a wonderful collaboration, kind of a public-private partnership. Colorado Springs Forward funded a portion of those, Springs Fabrication. That was also the company that did a lot of work for the Popsicle Bridge. Actually fabricated them. And then a group of Colorado Springs Leadership Institute folks came together 2 Saturdays ago, and we installed 21 legacy loop markers around the trail. Parks is creating a signage system for the ends of the trails, and then working with Kate in traffic engineering, a street connection system, so you'll be able to use the loop right now, even though it's not fully built, because there's low stress connections that go in between. And so that's something that's taking place right now that we've been advocating for a while, and it's kind of a big success that we started it before the end of the year.
Is that signage, is that based on the parks, general vocabulary of signs, or is there something unique about it that identifies the loop and becomes kind of a signifier as to that particular facility?
During the first installation are little metal signs that don't even say Legacy Loop on them, but they incorporate the design and the graphic that was developed during the Legacy Loop, kind of the master plan for it. And so they pulled that logo, did it in metal and green. The park signs at the ends will then incorporate the colored version of that with Legacy Loop. So it's more, they're like, I don't want to call them confidence monitors, but basically markers that you're on the loop, especially on the longer stretches in between points, that you're still on the Legacy Loop. And then the on-street signs, I know we're working on a couple different designs for those of what's most appropriate. And hopefully by maybe Q1 of 2018, that could all be done.
The design looks very mystical. It's almost Buddhist, I think.
What is it?
It looks a lot better in color, but to keep with parks, things have to be either green or brown many times, and so they powder coated them. I would have to say like Parks Green, and so it does without a legacy loop or something like that. They're a little odd right now. It'll make a lot more sense once the rest of the signage gets installed. Yeah.
People have commented about the installation of the ribbons. Good job. The red and green.
And that was a citizen that elected to do that, and it added a nice holiday touch to it.
Yes?
Could I make a quick citizen comment?
Oh, you bet.
Okay, thank you. I would just like to welcome our new members of ATAC, and I would encourage you to reach out to your city council people. whoever is your city council person in your district, introduce yourself, send an email. Let them know that you're now a member of ATAC. Let them know that if they have questions about bicycle transportation or if you can help in any way, and start creating that communication, because there certainly would be some times when we would ask you to reach out to them and just kind of let them know what's going on, what my challenges be, and so forth, and you really sort of serve at their will. So it'd be great to make that connection and then use it effectively when it's appropriate. And if you need any information about who your council member is or who the at-large council members are, we're happy to help.
Anyone else? With that, let's move to approval of the meeting summary for November 14th. I presume everybody, at least on the original members of ATAC, have had a chance to look at that. How about our alternates and members? Have you taken a look at that particular meeting summary? Are there any comments relative to the meeting summary?
Question. It's somewhat related because it's mentioned in there. I was just curious how our comments related to the bike master plan were passed on to CTAC. The consultant was here directly, so she's taken them and has been incorporated into the plan. Okay. Do you know if they were shared with CTAC in terms of what was talked about?
Or has our recommendation been presented to CTAC?
They passed it with,
Well, we presented it, we discussed it, they liked it, and endorsed it.
But wasn't it presented with other comments? That's my concern.
Oh, those were incorporated, right, in the presentation that was made to CTAC.
I think so. Yeah. It was a while back. I can't remember exactly. I think that, she was here and we've been discussing what we talked about, so that's.
Yeah, so when just so I'm clear, when she presented the plan to CTAB, that's when they saw the plan including our comments. Am I following it correctly?
I presented to CTAB.
What's that?
I presented to CTAB, Jessica did not.
Oh, okay. But that revision of that plan included our comments, then, is what you're saying?
Let's see, the revisions, we're doing actually one round of revisions, so they read the same plan that we did.
So then, back to the initial question. So they did get our comments then? CTAC did?
Horst got.
I guess there's two ways to look at it. Do we just assume that the comments are going to be incorporated into the revision and not worry about whether other groups hear about it or not? Or is it important that they hear it so they can either confirm or say not necessarily?
I think that the consultants took the comments from both groups and are incorporating them as
before it goes to city council? Okay.
Before it goes to Parks Board and before it goes to Planning Commission as well.
Well, I think as an advisory board to CTAB, I think it would be imperative that they hear our comments as well as getting, I understand that the design group ultimately is the ones creating the project or creating the draft. But once again, I think to enhance the collaboration between us as an advisory group and CTAB, who's kind of our superior, I think that it is important that CTAB hear the comments that we make in their meetings.
Then I would suggest that the person who makes that motion write it in, actually present it, send it to me in writing, and
And that way it doesn't go through, you know, Horst taking notes or me taking notes, and we'll make sure that that
Well,
happens.
it is a work in progress. I mean, what 2 or 3 comments do you think were the most pertinent ones from us to them?
Well, I thought it was, well, it wasn't even comments, I thought it was that we voted on to approve the draft, and maybe maybe I was wrong, but I thought we voted to
Yeah.
approve the draft with the revisions, that was like kind of the modifier there. So when it goes to the board that we're an advisor to, and they see the same draft without, you know, also hearing what we've commented, it just seems like there's a disconnect, I guess that's.
Tim, what do you remember? I mean, I thought these comments were, the few comments were incorporated as Kate gave that report to CTAC.
Well, so I guess don't know what the ATAC comments were in addition to the draft, or pertinent to the draft report. So I would say I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the comments were. Are they? Can you quickly summarize what they were that you're concerned about?
Well, yeah, right at the conclusion of the meeting, there was like 3 major things that we suggested that we wanted, that we would have liked to see included in the bike master plan, and we kind of voted to approve the master plan, like, once again, like, with those comments. And mine was that there should really be some data in there about the benefits of infrastructure to motorists as well as cyclists. That it shouldn't be viewed as just this is only, you know, benefiting cyclists. There's a lot of benefit, you know, that there's decreased conflict between motorists and cyclists when there's bona fide areas for them to go ride in. And that would, of course, would be a benefit, you know, to motorists, even if they never ride a bike. So I wanted that to be clear in the master plan, and I thought that we kind of, there was a consensus that was important to put some more of that information in there. And then, Aubrey, I don't want to speak for you, but I know you made a comment about the importance of the complete streets ordinance, and that wasn't really spoken to at length. And then the third one was Doug's, and I can't remember what it was. There's 3 though, and I remember, you know, I remember the consultant taking notes and things like that, saying, yes, these are important, and we're gonna pass these on, and then it was, my understanding, we voted unanimously to approve it on the contingency that those would be passed on, or.
So if that was part of the motion,
Yeah.
and with those 3 additions, then that.
The comments were not part of the motion. The comments were, you know, with comments, but they weren't highlighted in the motion, so, I mean, I think that's something that we can.
But it's in the minutes. I mean,
It is in the minutes.
you know, the educational angle, you know, then the master plan benefiting motorists, and that was in there. That's the minutes that we pass on to CTAC, so, and that was read and approved and incorporated, so I think we're okay.
So then, if the discussion is part of the meeting summary to CTAC, and there's the ATAC summaries, it's a summary report that goes in their packet. And if that's in the summary packet from ATAC, then they would have seen those comments in there. I don't know if it was, I don't recall if it was part of specifically of the presentation, but if it's in the summary report, then it's in there, and that was not pulled off consent or discussed by the CTAC. Now, if there's a concern, you know, that's something we can easily give a staff report to at the next CTAC meeting.
Well, and that might be appropriate. I took some notes relative to Steph's comments, and you were very specific about benefits to drivers. And the best example is roadway dieting and traffic calming and the positive effects they have on neighborhoods, not just for cyclists, but for all of the community, everybody who uses those roadways. And it could have been, looking at the meeting minutes, it could have been stated in a little bit more detail. I mean, I'm sure it was clear to Jessica Fields, but, you know, the consultant.
I'd be interested to see, to look at the PowerPoint presentation again, because some of that's coming to my memory like it was part of the discussion. Not like discussion with the CTAC, but like the wording was there in part of the presentation. I mean, we could verify that, and we could definitely pass it on as communications.
So, two things. I wonder if it's possible that Jessica has those notes still. That could just quickly be shared. But it sounds like in the future, when we make a motion, rather than just saying with comments, we need to be more specific.
Which comments and what do they?
Absolutely.
Yeah, what it actually says,
Yes.
so.
I mean, it's specific to this issue that we're talking about, but I think in general, that I just don't want more pertinent pieces of information to get lost in just the broad, kind of comment spectrum that we pass on, to CTAB, because I just think that there are times when, we're stating more specific things that have to be, maybe just emphasized a little more, and then spelling them out more specifically to pass on is probably a good idea.
Is it reasonable for one of us to reach out to Jessica or just one quick email? She has those notes from me.
The notes from the ATAC meeting.
She was
Right.
like feverishly taking
Yeah.
notes about comments that we had
So
to the draft.
We've talked about them. If you would like to reach out to her, I can present that.
And Aubrey, I might add that you had mentioned the term development patterns as far as how the master plan relates to our community. And of course, we've had discussions relative to infill development and other things which are important in this community. And for the more urbanized areas of Colorado Springs, obviously, there's more people who are likely to be either solely dependent on bicycles or foot traffic or transit than other parts of the community. So that was an issue when we presented our work plan to CTAB, and the development patterns, I think, were less important than this is what happened. So, but I would certainly support if Audrey's willing to take the lead on a few of these items for you to inquire with Jessica Fields. I think that's appropriate. And I would suggest that we amend the minutes to include that reference to Aubrey contacted the consultant to talk about specific comments.
So we can table the minutes.
No, I'm willing to, based on that addition, if that makes sense to you, Horst, I'm ready to entertain the motion to approve the minutes.
What are you changing in the minutes?
Only adding that, per our comments in the review, we're asking for verification of some of the notes taken by Jessica Fields, or the consultant team.
Not in the November 14th minutes, but in today's minutes?
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, it could be that way too, that's fine.
It should be part of today's minutes.
Okay, let's do it that way,
So we'll to approve the November 14th.
without modification. So is that your motion?
My motion.
Aubrey's moved, second? Steph? Any other further discussion? All in favor of approving the minutes from November 14th, say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. So, that brings us to new business, implementation of complete streets, and Troy and Ted. Is Ted here?
Ted's not gonna make it, but Kevin is here.
Okay.
My apologies for that.
That's right.
And what's your last name, Kevin?
Cofer?
Cover?
Yeah, K-O-F-F-O-R-D.
Troy?
Good evening. Thank you for having me, talking to Kate and Tim. We wanted to sort of, as you embark on a new transportation master plan this year, as you look at the committee's role, as you look at complete streets ordinance, I think there's a number of speakers or engagement strategies Kate has in the future. This presentation is more about perspective and sort of understanding how to implement them, because an ordinance unto itself will not get you where you need to go. And I want to sort of give this. I'm a transportation professional and urban planner and urban designer. I've been building transportation investments all over the country with the sole goal of building more livable communities. That has been my practice for 26 years. And this cartoon, I think, sort of summarizes complete streets, right? You have the traffic engineer saying, hey, pedestrian, let's try to drop that time across the street. Can you do it in about 3.5 seconds? Yeah, you sort of get the dismay of the pedestrian. Is that a check mark complete street? You accommodate it, right? So it's sort of a question as you go forward. So my background is I did 18 years of consulting all across the U.S. And then I did a stint in Louisville. So Louisville outside of Boulder. I was the planning director there. And so I know both sides of the equation of designing and inspiring more livable streets, but then actually working with city councils and actually trying to implement that. In Louisville, we implemented one of the country's first on-street patio programs. And the city of Louisville led the planning and design of the state's second diverging diamond. Now, you have a diverging diamond. I think you have the third one that was built. Ours is kind of unique in that we're the only one in the country that has on-street bike lanes, dedicated busway and arch, 2 regional bike trails on each side, and dedicated bus ramps and an express lane. So it is a truly multimodal, complete diverging diamond from a design perspective. So I've worked all over at different scales in Colorado and the U.S. and trying to implement it, working with various city councils. And I want to talk about complete streets and, more importantly, the title of your group, active transportation, right? Because it really is about creating active transportation. And so looking at our streets, there's different components. You get traffic engineers, transportation planners, community planners, debating different things. So you ask the question, what makes a complete street? What makes an active community? Is it the lane widths? Is it the curb radii? Is it mast arms in terms of their design? How about street trees? Sidewalks and bicycle facilities? What about on-street parking, building design and placement? What about people? What about flower boxes, right? When you think of active transportation, you're really talking about active communities and designing it. And you play an important role in sort of advising the Citizen Transportation Advisory Board and ultimately City Council on what is active transportation, what its role in city building. And so we know the ordinance that was passed in the creation of the ATAC. And your role is sort of advising the Citizen Transportation Advisory Board on active transportation committee. So the question is, what is active transportation? Because it's very broad. And what are complete streets? And then how do you advise? Do you advise simply on transportation facilities, or do you advise on all city building mechanisms? Right? Those are sort of questions that you can ask as you go forward. And then you have the ordinance done in December 25 that defined complete streets in Colorado Springs. And it's kind of embedded within the adoption of the Transportation Master Plan. It's here in every ordinance, because I've written these all over the country. They have necessary, what we call backdoors. And those necessary backdoors from a policy perspective, and in this case, wherever pedestrian facilities are illegal or impractical, they have an out in their design. Every ordinance in the U.S. has one, and I've highlighted and underlined areas of your back door. And that's not a shot at your ordinance at all. It's just a reality. And so without sort of guidance on actually how to implement that, it becomes very vague on what are these back doors in terms of implementing more complete designs. Before we go into complete streets, and I'm not going to get into details of complete streets, I'm going to sit at the city building level and sort of understand what your role as a committee is and what the role of the city council is. And that your relationship to city council is very important. And the citizen who said, get to know your city council members, because they are city builders. They're the only entity in the entire city that is responsible for city building. You've got engineering responsible for various aspects or silos of public transportation, water, infrastructure, drainage. You've got planning, you've got finance. You have all these different silos, but city council is the only one that sort of sees it in perspective. And all too often, we have land use and transportation debating on what the values are, and the whole aspect of city building or place suffers without that understanding. And that is city building, is the place that you create. And so your role in the Citizens Transportation Advisory role is related to transportation, right? And there's different aspects of transportation: vehicle circulation, transit, bike path, ADA, safety. Those are all important, and that's your advice to city council. But you've got to realize that advice is but just a microcosm of what city council is responsible for. And so there's perspective in what you need to do and how you relate to city building, right? You have the community vision that relates to the many different aspects of community planning or city building itself, the financing, the economics, the housing, and public infrastructure provisions, all of that aspect. And those get translated into your capital improvement program, your municipal code, most importantly, your budget, your operations budget, and your capital improvements budget. So you can start to see where transportation fits within the realm of city building. And so if you only talk about your investment from a complete street, or we have to accommodate the bike on a certain design, you're losing an opportunity, or you're not putting your argument necessarily in perspective to be the most effective. It's sort of understanding how your investment in transportation relates to city building. And that's where the most successful complete street programs all over the US sort of understand that role in that perspective. Because transportation investments build community. It's never the other way around. Land use doesn't build transportation. Land use doesn't guide transportation. Transportation guides land use. It's a cyclical thing, sort of, but transportation dictates, and I'll walk you through it. Our streets and the platting of our public right-of-way is the bone structure of our community. It is the skeleton to which land use fits. So, Savannah, Georgia on the left, Irvine, California on the right. You see designed by Oglethorpe in the early 1700s, is Savannah on a traditional grid with the public squares. And then Irvine, designed in the 1960s, really relies on an arterial network with collectors and locals, mostly cul-de-sac design. So how does that translate to land use? Well, Savannah has been around for over 300 years, and its land uses around the public squares have reinvented themselves time and time again. People are temporary, buildings are temporary, land use are temporary. The only things permanent in the city are streets, public right-of-way versus private use. And so the layout of Savannah on this public square, these buildings have been residential, they have been office, they have been retail, they have been restaurants, they have reinvented themselves as the city grows and changes. Yet Irvine, you look at these land uses from a transportation perspective, they will forever be residential. Will they be successful residential? They'll age, right? When they're new, they have young, robust investors. As they age, their investors tend to age. And they start to get in this cycle of decline, and it's harder to reinvent yourself, unlike Savannah. Savannah can reinvent itself because of the way the streets are laid out. And so when you look at the fundamentals of city building, it is really how the streets are laid out and how they're designed. And it influences many things, right? A little bit of humor here for you. Savannah can produce literature masterpieces, and Irvine produces Housewives of Orange County. Just trying to throw humor in here, keeping you on your toes. So what is that relationship of transportation and land use? And this is really important for as you go forward and you start to prioritize and give advice on complete street design, right? And so the conventional approach to transportation planning and our marching orders, and you think about this who calls city council, this is who calls Tim and complains, right? Our objective is to move more cars, and we did that very well from 1930 until about 1980. That was our priority. There's only two ways to move cars. You do more pavement, wider, more roads, or you do more efficient, one-way streets, roundabouts, improve the signal timing. That's what's more efficient, right? And so what does that do to land use? Because land use is not static. Roads are static. Land use is dynamic. So what happens, this is Johnson City, Tennessee. They do a long-range transportation master plan based on projection, right? That projection said this road needs to be 5-lane. But that's based on a rural countryside. So let's resize that road to 5 lanes. What happens to land use? There's a thing called a variance that goes through city council. So a landowner can go to city council and say, my former 50-acre farm was adjacent to a nice country road. Now I'm next to a 5-lane freeway. I can't survive as a farmer. And they're human. City council members are human. They'll rezone the property, right? They'll rezone it to the next subdivision coming in. So transportation dictates land use. We see it all over the U.S. And so what does that do to transportation planning, right? So what we do from transportation planning perspective is we try to size the road in purple in terms of a forecast. So we say this many people are coming over the next 20 years, so we're going to size the road from 2 lanes to 4 lanes. It can carry this much people. What happens in reality is called a phenomenon called induced travel. So you as a motorist or a cyclist or a pedestrian, your ability to move, if it's easier, you're gonna move more. So over time, we never see our roads actually handling it. And the phenomenon is called induced travel. This is your willingness to save 5 cents on, travel 5 miles further to save 5 cents on toilet paper. We used to have mom and pop convenience stores, now we have big boxes. They're using the transportation system to draw you to the retail, right? And so it's called induced travel, so you can never actually get on top of it. And understand that transportation and land use are integrally tied together. And you get to a point from a complete street design is the road can't be improved. So this is a 6-lane road in each direction with auxiliary turn lanes. You say, what more can we do to that road? The only thing you can do is start to grade separate interchanges. What can you do from a land use perspective? So let's not talk about transportation. What can you do from a land use perspective? Not much. Only retail survives on a road like this, right? Residential doesn't do well on a 6-lane arterial. Many land uses don't do well on arterial. So if you go at it from moving cars as if nothing else matters, you're going to create land use that's indicative of this that cannot be further improved. And there's other consequences, right? From a public health perspective, we know inactivity epidemic is a contributing factor to obesity. We know it. It is a significant contributor. There's other factors. We understand isolation in these communities where you don't have active transportation. We know we have a rise in teen depression. Is it the sole cause? Absolutely not. There's a number of causes. But is it a contributor? Absolutely. We know from an affordable housing perspective, look at our budgets, right? Transportation accounts for nearly 20% of your household income, second only to housing, right? If you look at Tampa or Atlanta, they're actually more expensive to live in than New York because the cost of transportation in New York is actually lower than Atlanta or Tampa. Yet the housing is so much higher in New York, but they actually balance out to a net lower cost. So when you look at affordable housing, affordable transportation is actually a key strategy in making your communities more affordable. You can look at it from a cultural perspective. Again, trying to keep you on your toes. I don't want to make this impressive. Yes, that says Our Lady of the Highways Catholic Church. Right? So even this investment in cars, and as if nothing else matters, can impact our cultural values. So what are the principles of active transportation? Your job, right? Your job as active transportation advisors, right? It's a more lateral way of looking at transportation investment. Are you going to move more cars? Of course you are. You're still going to do that. It's still a fundamental primary aspect of our transportation. But aren't we in the business of moving people and not just cars? Right? And then we have to invest in bicycles, we have to invest in transit, we have to invest in walking. Of course, that's your job, is to advise on that. Right? Improve the quality of the trip. Studies have shown improving the quality of the trip, the visual aesthetics, detracts from the delays that congestion provides. Right? So we're being transportation engineers from the 90s on. We're doing things they were never asked in 1980s or earlier. Context-sensitive design, traffic calming, streetscapes, personal security. All of those things are now in the hands of the transportation department, which they never were before. How about moving less people, fewer miles? Getting people to actually live closer to where they live. Those aren't transportation strategies, but they're probably the most effective. Land use planning, allowing people to physically locate closer to where they work and change their behavior based on how the city is designed. And lastly, manage, not solve, right? With a stroke of a pen, you hear level of service all the time. With a stroke of a pen, if you have a level of service C and you decide to go to level service D with a stroke of a pen, you've just increased the road's capacity by 20%. And so policy, and we're seeing it all over the country, they max out. You won't see the state of Florida build larger arterial streets, period, than 6 lanes. They won't do it. And so they know that that's not the future. And just changing the standards. So that's the range of solutions. But I want to give you some facts about transportation that empower you as you go forward. 2 2-lane streets carry more traffic than a 6-lane or than a 4-lane street. 3 2-lane streets carry more traffic than a 6-lane street. Network is more effective at moving cars than people. And it comes down to straight Institute of Transportation Engineer facts. So what would a transportation presentation be like without boring charts and graphs? So I got to go there too. So what you're looking at is the number of cars per hour per lane. So on the left is 1 lane in each direction, no left-hand turn lane, right? The second one, the highest peak, is a 3-lane road. 1 lane in each direction plus a left-hand turn, right? If we just solve the left. As you get larger to 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lanes, this graphic does not say a 3-lane carries more. It does, however, carry more cars per lane, right? So a 3-lane road can carry upwards of 900 cars per hour per lane, where a 6-lane road is carrying about 400 cars per hour per lane. Now multiply that by 3 because there's 3 lanes in each direction. So it's carrying more cars, but it's less efficient in its design. That's why 2 2-lane streets can carry more cars than a 4-lane street. How we lay out our streets matter. It matters tremendously. So on the left, Andreas Dwani at DPZ did this in the early 90s, and that's this classic suburban diagram of the mall, the apartments, housing, and school, all laid out in pod development. And so what we did in my firm is we did what we call trip assignments. So your home-based shopping trip, your home-based work trip, your commuting trip, we put it on the road. And what it illustrates very clearly, with disconnected roads, every last trip is hostage to the arterial. By necessity, the arterial has to be bigger. That's the way we lay out our city. Alternatively, same land uses, arranged differently, connected differently. You still have the mall, the houses, the apartments, the same amount of land use, arranged differently. Now do the trip assignment. You can actually connect the entire city without using the arterial. Therefore, the arterial doesn't have to be as big. So understanding how land use plays, and that's all in the realm of planning. The city engineers have no influence on this. The planning department, through their zoning code and their subdivision regulations, guide this. So the city planners are responsible for the lack of walking and cycling in certain parts of the town because that's how they laid out their subdivision regulations. So what does that mean to cycling, right? When you have a disconnected network, you have more, they're really designed to accommodate through traffic and doesn't really accommodate local traffic. Because land use is far less important when you design streets. So now apply this to Colorado Springs. When we have these disconnected streets, the arterial has big responsibilities. They have, from a land use design perspective, it's less important. Higher travel speeds are more important because they're now accommodating through trips. Controlled access, where we place these driveways, where we place these intersections need to be spaced out. They have limited connectivity. Walking and biking are not viable alternatives to this form of layout. Transit could be a partner through dedicated lanes or bus service. It could be a partner, but walking and biking really aren't viable transportation partners. They become more health-related or recreational. Yet, if you design your cities different where the local trips sort of dominate the layout, right? You look at what matters when you design your street. Land use matters. Land use matters where the restaurant is and the sidewalk cafe, your home, it all matters. Lower travel speeds are the priority. Open access, good connectivity, walking, biking, transit are all viable transportation alternatives. Travel speed. We design our roads for certain speeds. This is straight out of the highway capacity manual. And what it's telling you is between 25 and 30 miles an hour, you're going to move more cars per hour per lane than at any other speed. If you go faster than that, the gaps between the cars get larger and you're not processing as much. Because we know, unless we're a male adolescent influenced by hormones, you give space to the car in front of you, right? You're more generous because you're cautious. And that space that you give, traffic engineers know, it becomes less efficient at higher speeds. At slower speeds, we know we can drive more confidently because we can brake and react to them. But when you get under 25 or 30 miles an hour, you're less efficient. You just can't, you're not processing enough cars. So why is this diagram important to everything I've talked about? 30 miles an hour is a speed very compatible with cycling. It's very compatible with adjacent land uses of all types, be it industrial, be it residential, be it office, be it restaurant. 30 miles an hour is a good neighbor. If you want to walk adjacent to it, you can do it, right? If you go faster than that, it becomes more hostile in their relationship. Safety should be, and is, the City of Colorado Springs' #1 task from a transportation perspective. right? And so we have design speed. So the graph on the right are stopping distance and sight distances from the American Association of State Highway Transportation Officials. It's called the Green Book, AASHTO. It is the federal guide to street design, and every state must be compatible with this. What it's showing you is braking distances and sight distance are not linear. It's an exponential curve. So at 20 miles an hour, it's not going to 40 or 60 that you simply double or triple it. You're exponentially increasing the distances. So here's a tidbit of advice. At 30 miles an hour, how close can a street tree be next to a street? 18 inches. At 45 miles an hour, you're 16 feet away. And because trees are fixed objects and dangerous to the car. So speed matters in its design. So when we design our speed, we come up with prevailing travel speed. So we know 15% of the population is going to speed. Again, male adolescents influenced by hormones, right? They're going to be speeding, we know it. But at 30 miles an hour, those incidents of crashes are very different than if we flatten our curves. We have horizontal curves, we have vertical curves in roadways. When we straighten those things out, roads get faster. And so you might have less crashes, but the severity of those crashes go up. Because we still know 15% of the population is speeding at whatever speed we design the road. Because we do something called the 85th percentile. So now, at higher speeds, the consequences are much more dire. For pedestrian conflicts with cars, bikes, car on car, at higher speeds, it's deadly. So we know we have distracted drivers through alcohol, drugs, and more importantly, the cell phone. We know that. But if you're a distracted driver at 25 miles an hour, the consequence of your distraction is very different than if you're distracted at 65 miles an hour. Okay? So speed is the most important thing to safety when you design streets and you lay out. Oh, by the way, 30 miles an hour is the most efficient. So you start to see all these things come together as it relates to land use and transportation. So it's not just the design and geometrics of the road. Land use matters, right? And this is probably the most frustrating aspect of what we're doing. If we have a complete street ordinance, we could simply do it. So this is the US with a patient. They have a rash of cars all over them. And the doctor is trying to prescribe a transit pill. It could be a bike pill. It could be a walk pill, right? Any sorts of alternative transportation could be in it. And the patient is saying, transit pill, no thanks. I'll live with cars a little bit longer. And that's political reality in every city. Why? It's because we haven't designed cities that our customers honestly believe that walking and cycling is a viable alternative. We have failed to design our cities that it's a viable partner. And you could do things very good in the arrangement of land uses and transportation. So this is an engineer's diagram of our trip distributions. So A, B, and C are different destinations. It could be your house, a school, and your place of employment. When they're spread out, 3 destinations equal 6 trips on the road. All these turning movements, more cars. If you actually got them closer together and create a Park Once district or Park Once environment, those same 3 destinations are now only 2 vehicle trips because the other 4 trips are done on foot or they're done on bike because the way you arrange land use really matters. And I don't think there's a better imagery than this. How we lay out our cities and design, not density. I'm not talking about land use and property rights. I'm saying how we lay out our city. So this is a townhome we laid out in Johnson City, Tennessee, again, just to illustrate a point. There's a park right across the street and a school 2 blocks further, yet no one was walking because the way the city was laid out with walls and subdivisions. If we simply turned those buildings around, landscape them, you can still drive to that school and park. We've done nothing to the roads. We've done nothing to density. You have the same density in this neighborhood. They're just arranged differently. Now you can actually imagine someone walking out that front door and going right across the street to the park or walking 2 blocks further to get to the school. The way you lay out the design of the buildings, it matters in how you lay out your city. What is context-sensitive design? And this is the secret weapon to implementing complete streets, is understanding your corridor, because we know council is responsible for many different things. and there's many different advocates. So one solution is not the right solution. You have to sort of tailor it. So this is Louisville on the right. This is, again, a DPZ diagram on the left. And we wrote a new comprehensive plan up there to talk about area types. So in Louisville, we had agriculture and open space. We had neighborhoods, more suburban style neighborhoods. We have a very walkable old town neighborhood. We have commercial corridors. We have office and industrial. And then we have our downtown. Every single one of them are different from a design and layout perspective. So where we wanted to put road design, bicycle facility design in downtown is very different than what we need to do out in the suburban areas. It's no different in Colorado Springs. Every city has what planners would call a transect. So what does that mean to roadway planning and roadway design? Context matters. And you're going to get pushback either from the politics of congestion in the suburban areas. If you're trying to be more aggressive with complete street designs on that facility, you're going to get more pushback in higher speed environments where the land uses don't match what you're trying to do. And so you have to look at sidewalks, and this is simply a diagram of sidewalks. You can have a trail in the countryside that's just dirt, all the way to an urban sidewalk in downtown. You can have street lights, none in the rural areas, cobra heads in the suburban areas, and more pedestrian scale lighting in the downtown. Look at how street trees are laid out. But it's no different with how the speed of the road is. If you have a single uniform street design that is ignorant of context, you're going to have conflicts. So what roadway engineers care about most from a roadway safety perspective is, do the environment, that's your buildings, the land uses, does it match the geometrics? So in downtowns, you need to have slow speed geometrics, smaller lane widths, tighter turn radii, on-street parking, everything that slows the street down, because you have a slow speed environment. The buildings are up against the street, you have active pedestrian life on the downtown. So that's good design. Slow speed environment, slow speed geometrics. In high speed suburban environments, good design. If that land use, i.e. a grocery store, is 400 feet away from the corner with a sea of parking in between, there aren't many visual cues to a motorist to say slow down. And so that's a high-speed environment. You need to match that with high-speed geometrics. If you have slow-speed geometrics in a high-speed environment, you have fundamentally unsafe streets for every user in the corridor. And so that's what the engineers can. Can you match environment to geometry? And that's how you look at context, and that's what this is saying. Now that can change. The beauty of this is land uses change over time. And so I wanted to talk about Denver's Living Streets program, because it's a great framework of how this committee can look at its streets in Colorado Springs. So Denver, back in 2008, started to study all of its arterials and understand different contexts to which they travel. And they're trying to implement more livable streets. So we came up with sort of a characteristic, so the planning department, the mayor's office, finance, public works could all get on the same page, because we need all the departments agreeing to street design. So you lay out the city from a roadway perspective and then a land use typology perspective. I'm throwing Denver, since the adoption of the Living Streets program, has been very successful in implementing more complete street designs. So everything on the right are just examples of what Denver has done over the last 3 years once the Living Streets program got implemented. So within this land use topology, you have different street types and different design criteria, right? So downtown is treated differently than the suburban areas, and we can get away with different things. And so Kinley Horn put in the first protected bike lanes on Lawrence and Arapahoe because it was a destination street within a destination. You're matching the land use design. And so they have 3 categories: connecting streets, multimodal streets, and all of them are complete streets. More complete network, think of it that way rather than complete street, is don't put all your eggs in one basket where you have conflict. Recognize your obligation to have complete neighborhoods or complete communities, not necessarily a complete right-of-way, because that doesn't mean success. And now Denver's implementing a very aggressive, they've taken a lane out on Broadway, putting in their cycle track, a parking protected cycle track. That is the image of that design. So let's do a case study. So we worked with Kathleen in the engineering department on Old Colorado City with the bid that represents Old Colorado City. We're looking just in Old Colorado City, and we're really only looking at 3 blocks as a part of it. Connecting so the historic role of this corridor, the first thing you want to do is, there's still belief, it seems like every slide is a different focus. Sorry about that. Back in 1890, this was the road network. Every last trip was hostage to Colorado Avenue, right? So we had to balance all of that. When you look at it today, and this is an important diagram because US 24 is a partner to Colorado, and all these parallel streets are now partners to Colorado Avenue. That gives you a lot more freedom to have a conversation about Colorado Avenue, understanding where the roadway is and where it was, because there's always politics. Because if there's congestion anywhere, Tim probably gets the call first, and say, hey, what are you doing about this congestion? And the council hears that. So it's called the politics of congestion. The best laid plans can be deflated by a single phone call. And so understanding and giving ammunition to the engineering department and council is very important. But also environmental features of Colorado City are really dictating where cycling and other transportation strategies. So you want to map out the topology and the hydrology, understand the land uses, what's there today, what can be there in the future in its layout, understand the street network, understand the traffic operations, both today and when build out happens. What are the traffic operations up and down the corridor? What are the bicycle facilities in the area now? How can they be improved? What's transit in the corridor? And what are the pedestrian features like, right? We also looked at parking utilization up and down that corridor. It is an aged corridor. We are actually fencing off benches and trash cans. That's a real photo. And so it's deteriorating, right? The corridor is deteriorating. So what are the priorities there? So we sort of laid out a strategy saying the transportation plan really says, let's look at providing bicycle access on parallel streets as well as extending a regional corridor, right? And then look at transit, look at all these other things. But Colorado Avenue is still up in the air because it's such an important street for so many reasons. Could it be a bike facility? Sure. Could it be more parking? Why not? Could it be a better pedestrian environment, more economic vitality? It really needs to be an engaged community conversation. So this is the existing right-of-way at Old Colorado Avenue. And so the strategies in this plan was we need to have a more rigorous conversation because City Council is responsible for many things, not just the provision of active transportation. So one strategy is prioritize traffic operations because there is a huge political contingent that wants to continue to travel through the corridor as if nothing else matters as quickly and efficiently as we can. So this alternative simply introduces a median for safety features, but it really doesn't do anything else to the corridor. The next is, well, what if we prioritized parking? Right? We can actually get more parking. There's perceived parking challenges up and down that corridor. How can we accommodate more cars in a livable way? This takes a lane out, introduces more angle parking. Right? That's one strategy. And then another strategy, how about invest in the pedestrian realm? Expand that. Take a lane away, give it to on-street parking, but actually improve those sidewalks while retaining the very mature trees, which are so wonderful up and down that corridor. And so that was the recommendation. Take 3 different strategies out and have a rigorous conversation with the community. And so a project approach going forward and how you implement complete streets is really taking an architect's way of designing a building. It's a design approach rather than an engineering approach. And what that approach is understand the desire of your client. Right? Every architect sits down with a homeowner and says, what do you want? And they tell them, oh, I want a master bath, European spa. You brainstorm and you throw, that's the desire. Same thing for community building. What do you want for Colorado Avenue? Oh, I want it to be economically strong. I want more convenient parking. I want alternative modes in there. That's the desire stage of the conversation. And then you got to go and do your homework. Right? This is where the architect says, I've never designed a house. I know you want a spa. Let's go learn about that spa. Right? It's the research. So we understand traffic. We truly understand parking utilization. We truly understand the economics of the area, what can be there. And so you do all these different layers of city building to do it. And then you design it. So you design a solution. You come up with your first draft of that new house, and your client sits down and reviews it with you. And you sort of tweak it and improve it in design, and then you discuss it, refine it, and then you deliver. It's not a traditional engineering approach. It's much more of a community outreach approach. So these are conversations. This is a corridor plan up in Louisville. This was the desire stage of trying to understand what the community wants. We need to do that for Colorado Avenue. If they're doing an investment on Colorado Avenue, who says the bike lane is the right answer? We need to accommodate bike facilities in the area, but do you need to do it within that right of way? I think there's a lot of people who have a lot of opinions, and you need to listen to them to do it. So that's the desire stage, right? You go out and discover, you do walking audits, you do bicycling audits, you understand, hey, there's no good bike corridor in the area, or there are good bike corridors in the area. Where are the design challenges? Really understand the design of the corridor. Then design it, and be free and willing to change that design based on a business owner's concerns, a resident's concerns, a commuter's concerns. Refine it and discuss it, and then document it and get that plan together. So it's not your traditional engineering approach. And that is the city's Denver's Living Streets approach to how they tackled Broadway. They did an 18-month process to take that lane out to introduce the cycle track. And that through that type of process, they created that answer. So all I wanted to do in this presentation, Kay, is get perspective. There's 100 different ways to design a street, and from a bicycle accommodation or pedestrian accommodation, context really matters in how you do it. Is it a protected bike lane, a buffered bike lane, an on-street bike lane? Do you even have a bike lane? Do you do a parallel street, a parallel trail? Those are all things that are context specific. And with that, I wanted to just throw this all at you, the fire hose of transportation and land use. And I just want to thank you for your time.
Troy, it's obvious that you use some of Anton Nellison's visual preparation survey,
Visual preference survey.
With looking at trees and broader sidewalks and different things in exchange for other elements of roadways. Right. And that's a good way to communicate. I mean, I'm not asking a question, I'm making a comment. But when you look at those amenities, sometimes you see the trade-offs better in this visioning.
And I encourage you to do trade-offs. So, Old Colorado, for example, going from level of service D to level of service E doesn't say anything, right? Ooh, E's bad in grade school. Well, roads don't break. Bridges break, roads don't, right? So roads, when they reach a level of congestion, people choose to travel a different way. They may choose to travel at a different time of day. They may choose not to travel at all, right? Roads don't break. Bridges break. And so that's the dynamic you need. So when you take these visual preference surveys, what we need to communicate in the engineering department of transportation, city building professionals, is what's the delay, right? So over that 10-block stretch from 31st to 21st, I think the exchange, if you went from 4 lanes down to 2 lanes, or 1 lane in each direction, 2 lanes to 1 lane in each direction, I think the total delay difference was 10 seconds. So for 10 seconds, do you get more on-street parking? Do you put a bike facility in? Do you put wider sidewalks? That's for the community to decide. But use language that people understand, because level of service F sounds bad, but if it's already an E, it might not be bad at all. And that's the language you have to understand is change the language so that people understand it.
I'm a West Sider in Colorado Springs, know Old Colorado City very well. Last night I was at a town hall meeting in the southeast side library.
Okay.
Very far away from here. And the city of Colorado Springs is about to, I guess, grow by 25% or so with the Banning Lewis Ranch, which is way in the hell out there, and provides many more challenges. So for the purpose of active transportation, does it even make sense to deal with Banning Lewis and that development? I mean, who's going to ride a bike from out there to Old Colorado City? If you have limited resources, should you focus on a place like Old Colorado City where it makes sense, to enhance the neighborhood and make life easier perhaps for the folks who live there? Or do you try and incorporate everything?
Well, that's a great question. Understanding city building is really, really important, especially in your job. 90% of Colorado Springs was built by who? It's a question. Because I was a planning director, I know exactly who builds cities. Who builds the city? 90% of it. The private sector. The city does not build Colorado Springs, right? There's about a 10% that will build a park, will build a city hall, will widen a road. But the city is actually built through the zoning code and subdivision regulations by the private sector. So you have to look at them both ways. So for the new development coming in, a complete street ordinance and design guidelines say more connected streets, design that facility for cycling. Will that cyclist bike from there to Old Colorado? Probably not, but will they bike to a school? Will they bike to, absolutely could, if you give them a chance. And so they're at no cost to the city. You have development regulations that say, in order for you to build in the city of Colorado Springs, these are the rules.
Well, that's the key.
But at the same time, you have capital improvement programs, right? So where do you concentrate your efforts? And that's why I wanted to show context, right? Where transportation investments either need to better match, where you have slow speed environments like the west side, yet you have high speed geometrics in the west side, that's a problem from a safety perspective. And so you can prioritize your capital program, which is not the development regulations, right? To better match and concentrate your efforts from an active transportation in environments that need it. But at the same time, don't ever give up on that new development, because you can guide that and shape it in a way, because if you don't do it right the first time, it's really, really expensive to retrofit.
Yeah, and that's actually what I wanted to interject, kind of a similar question is, I guess the problematic piece to all of like what you're saying is all of these cities we're retrofitting all these cities, you know, and our own included, and then so like I guess how do you prioritize then like what is the most important? Like where do you start when essentially you're retrofitting everything, with the exception of the small, you know, the new developments, you know, that are only a fraction of, you know, the city as it stands. Yeah, where does that prioritization lie, I guess? Where do you start?
Well, I think you have to have the master planning effort. So you're about to start a transportation master plan, you're just wrapping up a bicycle circulation master plan, right? You're doing your comprehensive plan right now. And so the priorities are city council priorities, right? And so how you implement and phase it, I think your job is to set the principles up and the objectives so that they can implement them and so that you're sensitive to it. So I think it's all of the above. You have to get the development regulations right so that you're building your city more efficiently. So the cost is borne on the right people rather than the wrong people. Because retrofits are always more expensive.
Right. Yeah.
So get the development regs right. But then as you do your capital program, you're going to have to do a mobility car-oriented corridor first in some parts of the city. In others, you're going to have to address a safety problem or finish a key bike corridor, right? And those priorities will rise to the surface in the transportation master plan.
Well,
And I think just be active in that.
You know, you spoke about Boulder and Louisville. And it's relatively fairly easy to work in a community like you did in Louisville, small, instead of incorporating that to Boulder, right? So wouldn't we be better off here if Banning Lewis were its own city and not even?
I'll let you answer that one. From a transportation planning perspective,
Yeah, well, that's what I mean.
it's better to be a collective whole rather than have competing priorities. And to think it's easy to do anything in Boulder or Louisville is spectacularly uninformed. It's a full contact sport, no matter what you do. A complete street design to a neighborhood plan to anything, it is a full contact sport. I would have 400 people show up just for a sidewalk. Nothing is easy in Boulder County. Nothing.
I have a few questions. So, the street classification in the living streets stuff,
Right.
so the destination model, is that an objective classification, or does that require some public?
No, it's community dialogue. And so that's just a framework. And this is like a comprehensive plan, right? A comprehensive plan hovers over a city with no ties to any one parcel. You can't legally, right? It's a vision.
Right.
So then you do a small area plan or a corridor. That's what strings to right-of-way, it ties to parcels. So these street design guides are, in the Living Streets example, are more aspirational and giving you a framework. But to say where it's a destination street, where it's a connecting street, that's really needs to be determined in a robust community involvement.
Okay.
Right?
Okay, and are those three classifications pretty typical, or would we potentially look at something a little broader?
Oh, Denver is Denver, and I wouldn't suggest anything from Denver coming to Colorado Springs. Colorado Springs has to have its own conversation about it, right? It's very different. I think the idea is less about the streets and more about the context.
Right.
Because we know Old Colorado City is very different than downtown, which is very different than North Nevada. And just recognizing that is the most important, is different place types. Because then what do you do for North Nevada is a different solution for downtown, which is different than Old Colorado City. That's what you need to focus on.
That's helpful. I have just one more question, sorry, Mark. So, in building a city, transportation guides land use, right? But in retrofitting, is it the same way? Does transportation always need to precede the land use, or is it sort of a?
There's a cyclical relationship, right? So transportation dictates the character of the land use. The land use responds, and then transportation has to respond to that. So it's sort of never-ending circle. It's a vicious cycle until you define what you want. And so, yes, they're clearly influential. But on infill redevelopment, you're limited. Right. And so, one transportation solution for Old Colorado Avenue, we could have widened it, in theory, right? But we know the economics of that are impractical. The social aspects are impossible, and the environmental damage impossible. So there becomes a point in city building that it's okay to accept a level of service difference, that the answer is clearly dictated to you. It may not be dictated out in the greenfield where the roads can be as big as they want, but clearly Old Colorado can't get any bigger, because then you're taking down historic buildings, right? And so you're going to be constrained in retrofits. And that's where giving people choices, and these choices are different routing choices, streets, different choices in movement, walking, bicycling, transit. That's, suddenly choice becomes more important than efficiency.
I guess I'm more interested in the flip side. So where you have a road that is too wide, that was designed, that was overbuilt, for instance, and the land use has responded, and then you go in and try to road diet it without any changes in the land use, it gets weird, right?
You can't do it, right?
So how do we remedy that situation? How do you go in with land use revisions at the same time?
It's very hard to put a circle in a square. Right. And so when you look at, say, North Nevada, or you look at different, more of these first generation development corridors, and now they're seeing reinvestment in the corridor, it's setting those priorities. So the strategy for North Nevada was, let's address some trouble spots right away. Safety and efficiency, there's only trouble spots instead of a wholesale corridor solution. Let's address these safety trouble spots. Let's invest in connections, because that's what we have up there. We have connections. We have better connections out there. And then position it for transit, right? And so it's sort of this evolution over time where you're looking at your development regulations and say, do we want more intense development there or not? That's the first question. If you don't want more intense, it's very hard to change, nor is it appropriate to change that street. But if you do have an economic opportunity and a desire by the community to change that land use, you can retrofit those roads to match the land use. But that's where the land use, the market says, look, it can go from a one-story industrial place to a four-story mixed-use community. The university and downtown and the proximity, they're sort of driving that, and that's magical in that spot. It's not, it can't necessarily be applied elsewhere. So land use is a big piece. Economics are more the drivers in that situation.
General question, do you have any fairly simple advice for a city council or someone who's trying to decide what to do in a particular place? How to make sure that the people that actually live in an area have some say in it? Like in Old Colorado City, we have people who are very involved in it. That seems to work okay. The area where I live, Platt Avenue, it's things seem dictated by people that have no connection or no skin in the game at all in the neighborhood. Is there a way to remedy areas that end up being a victim of far-reaching people? So look at that another way. What percentage of people that have nothing to do with the neighborhood should be able to storm City Hall with torches and protest something that has nothing to do with anywhere they go or they.
Apathy is the hardest thing in city planning, right? It's just the hardest when people don't
And we
show
all
up.
care.
And so you could have sort of community outreach goals for projects and say, did you contact that neighborhood?
Oh, and I don't mean apathy of the area.
No.
Being done, I mean somebody up way north up in Briargate saying what's gonna happen in our area just because they're irritated they have to drive through it.
Oh, yeah, I mean, well, everyone has a voice, right? And no one has a stronger voice than anyone else. That's the beauty of the democracy. So if you, to quote Getty
It's a
Lee,
nice theory.
to quote Getty Lee, right? If you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice. And so that's the hard part. So I think in these examples, council can have some public outreach requirements. Did I hear staff, did you get feedback from these neighborhoods on that initiative? And have requirements for certain feedback. Because staff, different outreach mechanisms can go out and seek information back. Because public outreach is no longer providing the information for them to come to you. It's about you going to them and making it more convenient so they know there's something going on. So you could require outreach requirements. North Carolina, there's a town called Davidson. Any development initiative, do you know Davidson?
Yeah.
Any development initiative Davidson is required to do a community design charrette. Right? Before they even submit, that the developer has to prove that they've had this community design charrette with the community so that what comes to council is a representation of some people's concerns. So there's different ways to do that.
Troy, one question from your perspective. We talked a lot about, and you have as well today, about higher volume, higher velocity roadways or transportation is inherently less safe. Lower velocity, lower volume is inherently more safe. Part of complete streets is that we're trying to put all of these very different types of transportation in context. And to me, it doesn't make much sense to do that on major arterials. But do you have a comment as to what might drive not trying to do complete streets in certain cases, or where the sweet spot is in between?
Your ordinance needs to change, because right now it's focused on the street. And so environments where you're high speed, where it is fundamentally unsafe to put, and it's called speed differentials, right? So pedestrians and cyclists have a certain speed, cars have other speeds, and the differentials, when they're high, it's fundamentally unsafe. And that's why we want to control driveways, because they're slower speed with higher speed. And where its speed differentials are extreme, the way your language reads in your ordinance today is they have an out. Right? It's unsafe. We can't do it. Where if you tailored your ordinance and requirements to say you have to implement a complete neighborhood or a complete street network or implement the bike plan, and have policies that give the transportation planning professional, both private sector and public sector, as they're looking at new development. Because I can't simply say it's unsafe. I can't simply say it's out of budget. I actually have to find a solution for the corridor and not the right-of-way. Because that's the fundamental problem, especially with so much of this newer generation development where we don't have good street network. You have higher speed streets by necessity, as I showed. And so you need to find parallel corridors for the cyclists and others. It's not that you wouldn't design those facilities to accommodate it, but the conversation gets really hard with someone who doesn't bike. What are you guys doing? And those people sit on council, and those council members hear from constituents saying, what are you doing out here? And they kind of have a point. And so I think the ordinance needs to be tailored to look at corridors or travel sheds instead of just right-of-way. Give yourself some flexibility.
Yeah, that actually leads into something I wanted to ask too, because as our city expands, I see it expanding predominantly like north and east. And newer neighborhoods seem some of them have really good embedded infrastructure that connects their small community or their small neighborhood, but then there's no connection that connects that neighborhood to the next neighborhood or to
Right.
anywhere else. Without utilizing infrastructure on arterial roads, like, how do you connect those? If the land use on those arterial roads are higher, doesn't dictate it, they're higher volume, high
High speed.
roads, how do you then prevent having those newer communities, which have great infrastructure in themselves, like, from being isolated from the rest of the city?
Right.
So what's the remedy for that, I guess?
So you have a bike plan. You have a transportation plan. Those should be informing your subdivision regulations. So when I have a development out and it comes in and they create an innovative design that's sort of a connected in their own way infrastructure, but it's still a pod out in the middle of nowhere.
Right.
The plan should say as those parcels develop in between, they need to provide the connection. So it won't be immediate.
Even if the land use at the time isn't dictated. is what
Land
you're
use
saying.
changes,
Yeah.
subdivisions change, and they'll be guided by your bike plan and transportation plan. So if I'm a planning director and I had a subdivision in between the subdivision that's way out there in town, if I had a bike plan or a street network plan, more importantly, transportation plan, that says there needs to be a connection, so when that development application comes in, the planning department will say, we love what you did, it looks great. However, where's that connection? And the developer said, I didn't want it, well, you gotta connect, because the plan says so. And so it's not a burden on them. And that's the misnomer, right? They're making all these infrastructure anyways, what you're simply saying is connect them. So they're spending money on roads anyways, or trails.
Right.
And so it may be one corridor, but this is where you tie the bike master plan to the land use plan and the comp plan, to the transportation plan. Because the only way the planning department can enforce it, because they're the ones who do it, is if you have to have the adopted plan first. And so that's where your bike plan, as you reviewed it, it needs to sort of talk about what's the bigger bike vision than what's out there today. And then the planning department can run with it.
And what I also hear you saying is that we might need to examine what needs, we need to examine what could be modified in those policies that dictate what sounds like predominantly private developer, the policies that guide private developers that are developing these things.
Yeah, your development regulations are everything.
Yeah.
Everything.
Because
They're embedded in the subdivision regulations.
Yeah, and it sounds like that's, from your experience, that's what's gonna drive connectivity more than anything else.
That's the only legal requirement. So the bike plan and the comp plan, they're not legal.
Yeah.
The subdivision regulations, they're legal. And so so when you think of a comp plan, it's 30,000 feet. Then you do a corridor plan or a bike plan, that's say 10,000 feet. Then you go down to the subdivision regulation, well, that's every parcel, has to do something. And that's where a lot of cities fail, is they take this great comp plan and aspirational vision, and it's not aligned with your subdivision regulations. Your subdivision regulations could still be 1950s subdivision regs, because you never had the political will to dive deep enough to fix them. But you need the comp plan first.
Okay.
What changes in all this planning when we're all sitting in driverless cars?
I don't believe anything's going to change, and for this reason. So when you're in autonomous vehicles, it's going to be more comfortable and peaceful to drive, right? Because someone else is driving for you. It's the car. But you still have to have those connected communities. And so you're going to see a lot more circulation out there, but you're going to have far less parking. So I think autonomous vehicles are actually going to promote far more walkable communities. They just are. Because you have all these parking spaces that aren't going to be needed, because it's the shared economy. So what you're going to see is car ownership fall. We're already seeing it with Uber and Lyft, right? People are using the shared economy today. And there's more trips on the road, but we're actually seeing parking ratios decline. I was in a conversation with Target yesterday in Parker, Colorado, which is as suburban comes. And Target is telling me their parking demands are falling, because they know how their customers are arriving. Internet is a big piece to their business now, but then the shared economy is the bigger driver, is people are arriving and just waiting for an Uber, Lyft, and coming back. And so autonomous, that's only gonna increase over time. But that's, the AV is, before it really gets fully implemented, is 50 years away, right? It's gonna be so expensive in the transitions. So look at the shared economy today and how it's changing the transportation industry.
Just one question, just real quick. That pie graph that you had up there about the costs of
Yeah.
transportation was that for an area in particular? Was that
Yes,
for Colorado
yeah,
Springs
that
or
was actually for Tampa.
Tampa?
Yeah.
How does that compare to Colorado or Colorado Springs or anything like that? Do you know that?
Well, the land value, the home prices are higher.
Yeah.
And so we have to study it, particular, because Tampa's home prices aren't as high. But the cost of travel is very similar, insurance costs, gasoline, car ownership, very similar.
So that
Right,
piece
but the
of-
question is, do you have transit? Tampa has zero transit. Colorado Springs has zero transit, right, in any meaningful way. Where Denver has a more robust network. So that's gonna be the variables.
Yeah.
But I think your transportation costs in general, but as a percentage of the pie, it'll be different based on housing and other priorities.
But that 17.9% or whatever that Tampa had was pretty similar then in terms of the cost of transportation.
It ranges between 15 and 25%.
And actually, typically, lower income individuals spend more of their income on transportation than.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a percent.
And a lot of it has to do with the urban geography of where the city grew. Anything that grew between World War II and 1980 is predominantly automobile driven, and your costs go up. For those areas, the urbanized areas like Modo and Denver developed when there weren't as many cars, and therefore transportation costs are less significant as a reflection of that. So. Well,
Susan
Susan,
Just-
yeah, let's hear some comments from everyone here, if you have any, Susan.
Well, just a quick question. So what do you see as the gold standard of complete streets as far as who gets it right? I mean, maybe you've even worked on some legislation, but when you look at a community with a great complete streets policy, who is that? What does that look like? So does Lewis Hill have a great one? Does Denver have a great one?
No.
Okay, who does?
Denver has a good one. Seattle and the Northwest tend to have the better ones. Honolulu is actually, and that was in the AARP, they've really, at a statewide level, really have dived deep into Honolulu. From a policy perspective, from a results perspective, it's very different. Right? Those results, Charlotte is one of the best from a results perspective, because they really sort of get the relationship and sort of investing in it. Denver's arterial corridors are doing really, really well in terms of making a difference on arterial streets, as they're starting to make huge inroads. I think of the major cities, Chicago is the best.
And they have a very specific set of guidelines.
Oh, yeah.
For complete streets.
Yeah.
Very specific.
Well, thank you.
Anyone else? Well, if we don't have any further questions, Troy, we really appreciate your presentation. Kate, great job getting Troy here. I know you're involved in some planning here locally, and we've seen the effects in Oklahoma City and north of that areas that are seeming to really work transportation into the urban fabric and do some really good things. So I think this was a great presentation and something this particular community has been looking for some time.
So this is sort of a foundational presentation, and then we'll hear from the city about specifically kind of what's currently happening. So, Bike Colorado Springs has requested their own time to present what they think, and so, subject to your thoughts that you all had, I was looking at January for that presentation and February to bring in people from the city to talk about, Troy mentioned the capital improvement program, subdivision regs, some of those kinds of things, to talk about what we're doing now and how, what might be helpful for them. So if that's,
To bring it home, yeah, that makes sense.
so that'd be January and February for this part of your work, and then, you know, what you wanna do after that.
What we do with all that information, that's the part.
Right.
So,
Excellent presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Wish council had been here.
Moving on to old business. Carlos Perez has presented what is really a resolution for city council to consider, is the way I see it. And it would be, in some respects, more in depth than what I would have expected, but I personally don't have any qualms with what you've done. I think it's comprehensive. It's got good references. I read through it and I don't see anything of, that's uncalled for or out of context. It seems to all fit together. Any other comments anyone would have?
No, I agree, I thought it was really well written, Carlos.
Could you just make a 3-minute review for the folks who are here?
Yeah, I'll try to do that. And for the new guys, my name is Carlos Perez.
I mean, if that's okay.
That's okay, want me to speak? Just,
Oh,
yeah, I've been a
absolutely.
23-year resident of Colorado Springs, and, you know, there's presumably all have copies of the resolution that was put together, and that was actually the action item. At the time, I thought maybe just endorse the findings of the Council for a Strong America related to military readiness. And you guys have seen the resolution. Hopefully you've seen some of the, this is for the new people who have not had some of this history here. But anyways, it was really just into context. It was this article in the Gazette that says our kids are just too fat to fight. And I'm a scout leader. I'm an Eagle mentor. I'm actually a merit badge counselor. You guys are familiar with the Boy Scout program. You know, I'm a counselor for what I call the physical fitness merit badges. It's cycling, hiking, swimming, and so forth. And one of the things is we look at hiking and walking and so forth. You know, a lot of my people who are, you know, I should say my Boy Scout troop, kind of look at, they're interested in going in the military. And, you know, it says, well, some of them may have some work to do to be able to pass some of the physical fitness requirements there. Currently right now in Colorado, let me point to Colorado, 70% of our youth are unqualified for military service. About half of those, actually about a third of those, of that 70%, it's probably about 28%. It's because they're overweight or they're obese, okay? And there's a lot of forces and factors related to that where our kids are just not walking to school anymore. We just saw, you know, some of these designs, some of these street designs that you can't walk, you can't get to school, you can't do anything. And we can kind of see some of what's called the negative effects of an unwalkable or unbikeable environment. It's affecting our youth negatively. And when I was looking at this 28%, I just kind of looked around my scout meeting and I saw, yeah, it's about the same. And we promote physical fitness in our Boy Scout troop. So this is a challenge. It's just because parents are afraid, you know, the streets are too dangerous, they're too fast. There's no walkable places. Just to get to the store, from my house to the store, I have to cross 17 lanes of high-speed traffic, 17 lanes, to get to the store from my neighborhood, and it's only 1 block away. And I've talked to my neighbors about this, and they say, no, we're not going to let little kids, I'm not going to let my kid go by myself to do this here. So anyways, what the resolution does, and this is kind of from the military readiness perspective, the military leaders have said, this is unacceptable. There's a lot of things that we can do to address this, and one of them is active transportation. And what they're encouraging communities to do is to sign up for or to promote active transportation to address some of these physical issues or physical fitness issues where our kids are not getting the physical fitness they need. And by the way, in the Council for Strong America, they couldn't make it tonight. Hopefully they'll be able to have some military leaders address this specifically. I'm not military. I do have kids come to me and says, I'm interested in this. Hey, can you help me become Eagle? Because that's actually, you get a pay grades and get in the Air Force Academy, things like that. But anyways, yeah, so there was actually several things in there. I wanted to get your feedback on this. I kind of focused on the active transportation component, but there's also good nutrition as well, and PE. Just this weekend, I actually got to, I'm going to encourage you guys here to look this up, but there's actually a program called Walk with the Doc, okay? And I went down to Cottonwood Park, and there's an emergency room physician, and he is into physical fitness as far as walking being there. And he is well aware of the effects that the lack of physical activity on kids and adults have on our community. And he's promoting this for help as a doctor. The doctor is prescribing get out there and walk, okay? And this is from a medical professional. And we actually had a very interesting conversation about active transportation, also about driving. Did you know that the #1 cause for the deaths, fatalities for teenagers is automobile accidents? We're driving too fast. So it's like we're getting on both ends. We're driving too fast, killing our youth, and at the same time they're getting diabetes, they're isolated, the depression. We saw a lot of this. So really what this resolution kind of addresses, again, this is the factors in the military community we have to recruit from, is to actually promote this in that context, to help us with that aspect of it. But it's bigger than that, clearly. We want to be able to help our entire community be physically fit, or at least for our kids. It helps everybody, but in particular, the military has sounded the alarm. This 70% number where they're unqualified is just unacceptable. Hence, it turned into a resolution, and I wanted to get your feedback on that. The comment, and the reason it's a discussion item now, is that I felt personally, I wanted to hear what you guys thought. What can we do to make this a reality and try to get the support of the community? Because I can tell you right now, people are turning a blind eye, are indifferent to the plight of our youth, and being able to just get out there and walk, bike, be active, be able to get to school safely. There is an indifference in this community, and this is going to be kind of a sell. And so I wanted to hear your thoughts on this. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, and you guys tell me, what can we do to make this a reality?
Actually, at this town hall meeting last night that I spoke of earlier, with Pete Lee being there and Mike Merrifield, that matter came up. And the fact is that in our entire educational system statewide, so much emphasis is now placed on passing the test, right? On reaching various academic levels that, things like physical education, the fine arts, music, et cetera, and so forth, are pushed into the background. So, maybe by re-emphasizing physical education at the various school levels, we could also tie in with, your thrust to get the kids fit for whatever, right? Whether it's military service,
So tied in with the schools, and the other recommendation was PE, increase of the doctor, just to say, Dr. Cohen, the emergency room physician here, said that if we can just get kids to run 6 minutes, he told me 6 minutes, it has a dramatic improvement on their immune system. He's seeing a lot of kids coming in the ER, and the doctors are just seeing, and there was actually a pharmacist there too. Kids are sick. They're sick. They're sick. They don't have that, and they cannot build that immune system because they're just not, okay? And physical fitness, just even 6 minutes, I was surprised about that here, has a dramatic outcomes for protecting them. It helps build up their autoimmune system. So I can see, I was struggling with that and saying maybe we can do something with PE, incorporate that as part of the overall thrust, and say this is something we have to really encourage is PE in schools.
I really like the resolution. I like the fact you brought this idea initially to the forefront anyway, but I just love the resolution because it really targets on 3 key things that are all related, and also they're just also important to this city and this community. I mean, we talked about PE. There are schools in our city that don't have PE, and there's also because of the lack of some transportation infrastructure, there's also low-income neighborhoods that are kind of like food deserts too, where access to even going to get healthy food becomes a barrier. So I think all 3 of the things that are outlined in the resolution are all related, and they're all also equally important to the health and wellness, not just of our youth, but as our community as a whole. So I like the way it was presented and everything like that. And once again, I think it's the resolution itself brings these things that have maybe been in the background a little bit brings them to the forefront, it brings them in a connected way, you know, to the forefront, so.
I mean, all our efforts in this city and other cities to make the city walkable and bikeable and maybe public transportationable will come to naught if we have a society which fears, you know, letting the children walk to school. I mean, if that, you know, that fear factor seems to be escalating annually, and I think we need to turn that around. And, I mean, there shouldn't be a hesitation on the part of a parent or a guardian to allow the child to walk a half a mile to school. And even if it's just a quarter mile, that takes care of a lot of people, especially if the sidewalk is attractive and lit, you know, or swept of snow, and if, you know, the bike can get there without crossing 17 lanes of traffic. Yeah, that's absurd, 17 lanes of traffic, but you know, with the demise of the neighborhood school and the emphasis on charter schools, all of this kind of has changed, you know, and so society is somewhat, you know, counterproductive to the efforts that we try and address here.
Looking at this, I like a lot of what's in here. My wife is an exercise physiologist, so really good. I'm just curious, there's no bias, just wondering, is military readiness the best excuse we can come up with to make kids healthy? I mean,
Is that a rhetorical question?
That's a driving force there. I think there's more to life than military readiness.
I mean, I agree. What I think the emphasis to me is that it brings it to a different, it makes you see this through a different lens. That's how it was.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's an excellent question, because generally the outcomes for a healthy youth, it's beneficial for everyone whether you decide to join the military or not.
Oh, right.
But the military readiness right now, our military leaders have expressed alarm over this area, and we have a rich heritage here in Colorado Springs. So this is something that says, you know, we kind of look at things in the abstract here as, you know, 20,000-foot level, but at the recruiting level, there was an article in the Gazette, just I think it was a Gazette or Denver Post, I can't remember, but about how one recruiter, he got in, he was like over 200 pounds, and he was proud that he was able to knock off 70 pounds and be able to carry that back. They can go in the military and they can get fit, but this was tough for him he had to make up a lot of ground. It was very inspirational, but at the same time, why is he having to make up a lot of ground? Why didn't he have healthy habits in the first place and be ready? And that's what the military readiness part of it is, so that the military doesn't feel, and like I said, they're really concerned about this as an issue, and I thought it would resonate. You're right, there are bigger things that can help the community.
Yeah, you just have
but the military readiness is something that is, it's not just abstract, it's a concrete issue for our military leaders.
And it's one more reason.
I mean, after the first two, whereas if you took those out, it's still wonderful overall.
Aubrey, what are your comments? This is your vocation and your passion.
Well, by chance, have you spoken to your city council member about this?
Yes, I have.
What I'm curious about is how much teeth we can give it, and it be viable. So if we're going to go to the effort, which I think is a great effort, should we push it a little harder? Should it say a little more, have a little more teeth, or would that preclude it from not getting supported? Do you have a sense of that?
I know I did reach out. Here's my personal opinion on that. If we don't get the, I'm not standing here, if we don't get the support of city council, it's dead on arrival. And the last thing you want to do is put a resolution in front of them that's going to get shot down. That would be absolutely embarrassing. I'd rather not have a resolution if they're not going to support it. Now, I do know, I've reached out to Councilwoman Gabler, and she likes it. She used the word loved it, because it brings together, ties a lot of different things about healthy communities and the importance it is to our society, the military being one component of that society, okay? So she liked it. She believes that I've reached out to my counselor, Dave Geislinger. I have not heard back from him yet. And also, there was also Council President Richard Scorman, I believe, also could be a support. So there's 3 right there, and I have to probably talk to some of the other ones there. They're going to be skeptical about something like this. That's why I want to hear also, not just me, I want to have some military leaders come in and express, recruiters, and say, look, this is something that's important to us. And not just me, my person, as someone who's working with youth and who have aspirations to go to the Air Force Academy, to the Naval Academy, to these various Annapolis, and I get them all the time. And it's like, okay, they're really focused. We're going to get there. We got to get you movement too as well, the physical fitness component. But I have had support of at least 3, or I would say 1 counselor, and the opinion was we can get 2 more, and they liked it. So we'll see. If you guys have a better sense of that, I'm not a politician. I can just tell you, like the doctor said, we got to get moving.
And we are in the Olympic city, you know.
Yeah, so I think there should be some inclusion about Olympic City, and
Okay.
potentially that we also are a HEAL city, a healthy eating active living city. There's a number of things that we could include that would make it a little more lengthy, but potentially could give it a little more support. I think we need to talk about the military as a backbone in our community, and the fact that we have several installations here and that it contributes to a large part of our economy, and that brings it back to Colorado Springs specifically. We could include some health data saying that where there is proper infrastructure and kids then do walk more, then obesity rates are yada yada yada. We can look for that kind of thing. And then I wonder if we want to have something that speaks to sort of safe options, because some will argue, well, a kid can walk anywhere here, right? When I was a kid, we just went out in the streets, but the main argument from parents for not letting their kids do it is that it's unsafe, particularly crossing these large arterials. So we want to be encouraging infrastructure that is appropriate for all ages, not just plain old infrastructure. And so, any thoughts on whether we?
Well, and there's safe routes to school, neighborhood-based planning would always be a good idea, your local parks and neighborhoods, and all of those types of facilities in the neighborhood need to be optimized as far as accessibility and safety and the perception of safety as well. And that's a lot of what we can stand behind as well. If we're talking about children, I mean, it starts in the neighborhood, and you can always go to the gym or the Y, or have more PE at school, but neighborhoods that are conducive to that would help quite a bit, obviously.
So would you like it more, let me share, so I'm listening here to make it, to kind of edit it here and bring these in. So do you want it more prescriptive, make it safer type of language? I just don't want to put words in your mouth, but is that what I'm hearing? Kind of.
That's the thought I wanted to put out to the group. If you all thought
Yeah.
it's worth it to go to that length.
And I'd be more than happy, I'd be more than happy to actually make it longer. I always like, make it long. It's easier to delete stuff than it is to add it back in. So I'm more than happy to expand it, and if we need to pare it down, that's fine with me.
I mean, I think that touching on a couple things that Aubrey said, I mean, I think you can do it pretty succinctly, like putting some of that data in can be accomplished in an additional like 2 or 3 sentences and stuff, but yet it gives it like more support. I agree, I like that. And then my only question is, because I don't know the intricacies of what happens to resolutions and how they're carried out after when they are passed, it's like, are we asking for something in the resolution too that would be sort of plan-like, or are we just proposing this as an important item?
So what a resolution serves to just sort of affirm statement, but it gives bodies like ourselves or individual citizens some backup and impetus to go forward with more specific ideas and say this is in alignment with
the resolution.
that you
Okay.
all agreed to. Right? That's my thought.
On Wednesdays, I pick up my granddaughter from her charter school every Wednesday. and I get there and there are 180 cars ahead of me, all full of parents, grandparents who are picking up their charges, right? The kids walk out of the classroom, across the field to the parked car, you drop them off at home, they walk up, they turn on the TV, they work on their devices, you know, and then it's the mentality. I mean, none of this is gonna have any effect if we don't work on the cultural aspect.
You're talking about being more active?
Of course.
That, that's an interesting point. Listening to Complete Streets, and this is interesting. I'm glad we're having this conversation, but you know who Jeff Speck is, right? Have you read Jeff Speck about the walkable city? The 4 criteria that actually go into making an area walkable. It's got to be safe, it's got to be useful, it's got to be comfortable, and it's got to be interesting. When you have those 4 ingredients, it's like a cake, right? Those 4 ingredients, people come out. People will come out. Oh, we talk about safe, but what about interesting? The trees, comfortable, by the way, trees, planting trees makes it comfortable. Useful means that you can get to where you need to go. You don't have to cross a wall. We saw a picture of walls there that, and I've actually heard proposals that let's wall off the pedestrians, you know, make it, doesn't become useful at that point. But when you have those 4 ingredients, people come out. So when you talk about changing the culture, that's important. But also, if you change the built design, the built system here, people will come out. At least that's what the evidence supports. So by supporting those conditions, those preconditions for walkability, just as Jeff Speck has pointed out, parents will then be more comfortable letting their kid go to school because it's safe, it's useful, it's comfortable, and it's interesting. And the parents will come with them. The parents will come with them typically. Maybe they'll walk to school with their small kids because it's so enjoyable, it's interesting. So I just want to point that out. Now I understand this cultural thing, how you change that. It's a good question. But I'm looking at it more from the built environment. Let's get the pre-existing conditions there, and I think we will see some changes.
I enjoyed the irony. You mentioned walk with a dog.
Mm-hmm.
You have to drive to the 3 locations in Colorado Springs because you can barely bicycle or walk.
You know, for the walk to the dock at Cottonwood Park, I actually biked there, but I had to bike on some pretty high-stress, no bike lane, high-speed bikes, non-bikeable. And by the way, the park is Cottonwood Park from my house is about 2.5 miles away, and it's unbikeable. Parts of it there.
Right.
You have to kind of know the back roads, but that's aside. I'm looking for these 880 speeds where a kid, could I take my kid on this? And I can tell you, the route I took to Cottonwood Park, I would not take a kid there on it.
Right, and I just mentioned that because it shows that there is some need for something to be done here.
Carlos, I kind of, I'm striving to move this on to the next step. I appreciate your objective of not having it fail when it gets to the finish line. But it looks like we need more discussion. If you're amenable to that, I mean, the point of this particular review is discussion, not a recommendation. And I think we've found a few things that we can fill in some of the gaps if we want to continue this discussion in the next meeting. I don't see a problem with that.
May we email you
Some
thoughts or,
specifics.
language, and then we see another revision?
Oh, I would love it, just as long as it's within the protocol of working through city staff, I guess. Is that acceptable to do that, to email me the comments, or
Yeah, why don't you all email me the comments and I can send them.
so it's part of the public record?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but no, I was going to suggest that if you can email me the thoughts and thinking about it after this discussion, I would love that instead of just my recollection after this meeting. Okay, what do I need to put in there, like PE and food deserts and all the other things. Make it safe. I've heard a lot.
Does it make sense to have a deadline for when you would get comments?
To give Carlos time to be able to integrate them.
Yeah, let's do it, how about, the first Tuesday of the month, whatever that is. Second? The second? Would that be reasonable, everyone?
Does that work for you, Carlos?
Yeah, and for the next meeting, are you kind of looking at then a recommendation or another discussion, or we see where it goes?
I would be looking for a recommendation.
Okay.
But the discussion continues, so I think there's got to be a comfort level there as well.
Very good.
So, hang on.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, just to clarify,
Did you wanna have this on, or is it too early to decide whether it should be on the agenda for January?
I think it should be on the
It should be on the
agenda, and, matter of fact, and now we've got, Bike Colorado Springs is gonna have some discussion on complete streets. I mean, it's very similar to what the agenda for this evening, but these are, we've been asking about complete streets for some time, and we're really anxious to learn more and how it applies to our community, so. And I think this active transportation, objective that you're bringing is exactly what this committee should be doing, so I have no problem with those two agenda items for January, and maybe something else, I don't know.
We have to have our ethics,
Hmm?
our ethics presentation is would be in January.
Okay, well, that's pretty close to a full agenda.
I can't remember if something else.
Okay, when is the next meeting?
Yeah, can I just double check, is that January 16th? I think so.
Yeah, the third, what is it, the third
Third
Tuesday after
Tuesday.
the first?
We haven't been actually doing that,
Oh, we
we've just
haven't?
been doing that. No, we've just been straight up third Tuesday.
Okay,
And
that's
not-
fine, that's
and
fine.
not,
After the first Thursday.
yeah.
If that works and you don't have any conflicts, that makes perfect sense.
Mhm.
And I think for the new members, we might want to shoot out some appointments for a few meetings
Yeah.
here so you can plan ahead a little bit. We tend to meet more effectively outside of summer vacation and things, so we've got to get things done while the going is good, right?
Well, we haven't had a full committee, we didn't have a full committee over last summer, so,
Mhm.
now we have full committee and two alternates,
Right.
it may look different over the summer months.
I was just going to offer the comment that what might work is if you then have a resolution that you're all comfortable with, and I do think this is a very strong way to go, then you already have reached out to Jill and maybe, and Dave, and you can ask the council members then to kind of float it with some of the others, and they tend to do that, where they'll take it to Tom Strand and some of the others and just say, hey, does this look okay to you? And you kind of get this sort of informal support before it actually goes before everybody, and then it can be a very powerful tool. And it's just as you say, that it doesn't change anything dramatically in the community, but it is something you can point to down the road and say, this goes in line with what you said before about this, and the infrastructure we're proposing, or the change we're proposing here plays or is very much in alignment with this resolution you passed last year. And so it's just powerful.
A fairly good proportion of the council members are former military, isn't that right?
Yep, almost all.
Good? Any more discussion? So we'll move to staff and ATAC communications. Kate?
Yeah, I wanted to let you, so first of all, did we introduce Angie Martell?
Well, she introduced herself, you asked me
Okay.
to introduce her. Angie, this is Angie, everybody.
Yeah, so she's been, she has been serving as an intern. We are looking to change her status a little bit as she graduated on Friday.
Wow,
So that's very
congratulations.
exciting, from UCCS with a geography master's.
Marvelous.
She has been working on she's been working on a project to look at a map of not the full city map at this point, we're looking at smaller sub-area maps. And we've reached out to Steph to be part of that conversation. Mhm. And we, I believe last Friday also, we released an RFP for a wayfinding, to find a consultant to look at wayfinding for, not the full city again, but an area around downtown. So those are things that you all have talked about.
Any other topics for the group from ATAC?
I'll just give a quick, we've got a grant from Colorado Health Foundation called Healthy Places Designing an Active Colorado, specific to Southeast Colorado Springs, so 80910 and 80916 zip codes along the South Cadman corridor.
what will happen is a group of experts from the Urban Land Institute will come in for a week in January. They're real estate and development professionals, and we'll spend a week with them touring the area. They'll do a number of stakeholder interviews, 80 to 100 interviews. That ranges everything from community members all the way up to city council members and planning directors and things like that. And then they'll work for 2 days, kind of hashing through, they've done this like 600 times in other cities throughout the country and the world. Kind of what they've seen work, what's contextually sensitive to the area, and make specific recommendations to the community. We then draft that into a small action plan that's eligible for $1 million in implementation funding from the Colorado Foundation. So in that area, increasing physical activity, we're looking pretty high upstream at social determinants of health, safety, social cohesion, access to jobs, employment training, skills training, things like that, that give a person the freedom to then be able to invest in themselves and be more active in the community. And so those are kind of the things we're looking at. We're looking at activating vacant spaces. There's a lot of vacant commercial spaces in that area for better use by the community. What's most needed, what's most desired by the people that live there. And what is also in alignment with sort of the strategic and economic vision for the city and the region. So that's exciting.
Yeah, what is the north end of that? What is the range? Is that
Yeah.
the Academy corridor or broader?
So,
Just.
yeah, the defining boundaries are sort of airport on the north,
Okay.
Milton Proby on the south,
Mhm.
I-25 to the west, and then Power.
All the way to Howard.
Yeah, we will have to define more specific nodes within that area,
Yeah,
right?
that's the sign of
Because $1
empty
million
space.
won't go very far. Right,
Nothing
yeah.
out there. Okay. Very cool.
Harrison Schools.
Yeah, there's
Yes.
There's a
Wonderful.
lot of space, like vacant,
A lot of vacant space, yeah.
And that was a great expose, because that,
Yeah.
southeast part of town. For those who may not have read it, it's worth every word.
It's one of those, it was almost obvious, just intuitively, like, rich people have more money. You know, if that kind of thing, like, yeah, it's obviously not medically.
Well, and I was fortunate to have been on the architectural team for the Southeast YMCA, and that was a very rewarding and a very effective project.
Yeah, that's quite.
And there's all kinds of opportunities like that, so. Anything else from anybody?
I have a question actually, just real quick with the budget master plan. So, what is the next step with that? It goes to parks, right? Is that correct?
So we're still trying to figure out what, what the best way is to basically, there aren't very many plans like this that get adopted on a regular basis. They're trying to figure out from an ordinance perspective what's the best way, or what is the appropriate way for it to be adopted. In terms of the committees, the next two steps are Parks Board and Planning Commission. And so, but it depends on whether, those could be a one steps or two steps kind of thing, depending on what we're asking of those boards.
At this point, it seems like there won't be any major roadblocks that change it pretty much.
So the consultants are still working the comments in, both from, ATAC and CTAB, and then the comments that came in through the online.
My question was Parks and Planning Commission, how much detail do they get? Or do they just look at overall? Look at the plan?
I think both of them are pretty, so my understanding, and I haven't brought a citywide plan to either one of those.
Yeah, that's why
those,
well, maybe, what do you think?
I think that Planning Commission will have, a lot of interest and be interested in the details, and Parks Board is not necessarily, but because there is a great deal of overlap between this plan and the trails, you know, that they have, they will also have interest, and I expect, some pretty good discussion on both of those.
All right. Well, we've had a discussion on next month's topics, so,
It's the date, so
the 16th, so,
I will send out a calendar,
okay, to everyone
yeah.
on a few dates.
Mhm.
On the absence of any other comments, we're adjourned.
Hi.
Congrats.
Thanks. It's exciting.
Thanks, Kate. Go.
Those chairs though. I'm deciding to try that one.
So,
Don't go in a nonprofit then.
so.
I actually worked for a nonprofit over the summer.
Did you? Which
Yeah.
one?
It was in Alaska. The landfill section.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it was interesting. It was definitely very different than I've worked for the government in other situations, so I like black and white. Because you have worked for government as well, right?
No, I was in the private sector before.
Oh, okay.
So I've never worked for government. My husband has, but I've never had.
All right.
Yeah. Yeah.
See ya.
Good to see you. Good to see you. Have a good holiday. I appreciate it. Yeah, thank you.
Eventually.
I'm ready to.
Right? At least the blue frame is gone, thank God.
Yeah.
1920,000. So strange, almost absurd. You know, we're so excited.
So, yeah.
I did.